Welcome to AI Paper Podcasts. We dive into the latest AI research, break it down, and give you the insights you need to stay ahead. Today, we're looking at a really tricky problem in 3D content creation. How do you take just a single flat image and generate a complex, editable 3D object or even a whole scene from it? And crucially, how does the AI understand that object isn't just one solid lump, but made of distinct parts, even parts it can't actually see in the picture?
Yeah, that's been a huge hurdle, but this new paper, ParkCrafter, Structured 3D Mesh Generation via Compositional Latent Diffusion Transformers, quite a mouthful, by Lin and colleagues from Peking University, ByteDance, and CMU, offers a really exciting answer. What they built, ParkCrafter, it's essentially the first structured 3D model that can generate multiple, meaningful, geometrically separate 3D parts together, all from one RGB image. And the kicker is, it does it in one go. No need for fiddly image segmentation beforehand. It can even figure out parts that are hidden or completely out of view. The magic really lies in two core ideas: a new kind of compositional latent space and a clever hierarchical attention setup.
Exactly. So today we're going to unpack how ParkCrafter pulls this off and honestly why it feels like such a potential game changer for anyone working with 3D, from single assets right up to complex scenes. So let's just set the stage a bit. For ages, getting AI to really understand an object as a collection of parts, not just a single shape, has been tough. Think about trying to, edit a 3D car model if you couldn't select the wheels separately from the body. That's kind of been the state of play. Why is getting this structured generation right so important anyway?
Well, it really comes down to this idea of compositionality. I mean, that's how we understand the world, right? Objects are made of parts. And being able to think in terms of parts is fundamental for higher level stuff like language, planning, even reasoning about the world. You can break things down into meaningful units, you can generalize better. You can reuse parts, recombine them, understand them independently. Without that structure, you're stuck with these monolithic, unchangeable blobs. And that's exactly where most existing 3D generative models have kind of hit a wall. Even the really powerful diffusion models like TripOS G, which PartCrafter cleverly builds on, they tend to operate at the whole object level. They generate a fantastic looking mesh, sure, but it doesn't inherently know about the parts, which makes downstream tasks, well, difficult.
Like what kind of tasks?
Oh, trying to add a specific texture to just one part of the object, or animating only one component, or running a physics simulation where different parts need different properties. It's incredibly fiddly, if not impossible, without clear part separation. Now, there have been attempts to solve this with two-stage approaches, methods like hollow part or MIDI. The idea there is, first, segment the input image to identify the parts, and then reconstruct each part in 3D.
Right, sounds logical.
It does, but it introduces a whole host of problems. First, your final result is only as good as that initial segmentation. If the segmentation messes up, the 3D model is wrong. Second, it's computationally expensive. You need these extra segmentation models running. And third, they don't really scale well, especially to complex scenes with lots of objects. And maybe the biggest weakness is occlusion. If a part is hidden or just not visible in the 2D image, the segmenter can't see it, so the reconstructor can't build it. They struggle a lot with inferring unseen geometry.
Okay, so PartCrafter is essentially saying, let's skip that whole segmentation mess. You get the decomposed model directly from the image. That does sound pretty radical. Hasn't anyone tried that sort of end-to-end thing before?
People have tried, yeah, but often the results sacrificed either the quality of the individual parts or the overall coherence. Things just didn't fit together right. What ParkCrafter does differently is it cleverly builds directly on top of a strong, pre-existing large-scale 3D diffusion model, TripOS G. It takes the powerful generative capabilities of TripOS G, its encoder, its decoder, its pre-trained knowledge, and basically teaches it to think compositionally, to understand parts. And it does this using two main innovations. The first one is what they call the compositional latent space. So instead of the usual single chunk of latent codes representing the whole object.
Right, like one big description.
Exactly. ParkCrafter expands that. It uses multiple sets of latent codes. Each set is dedicated to describing one distinct 3D part. Think of it like digital Lego bricks. Instead of one data blob for car, you have separate data blobs for chassis, wheel 1, wheel 2, door, and so on. Each part pi gets its own latent token, Zaya. And here's a neat trick. To help the model tell these parts apart, they add special learnable codes, part identity embeddings, EI, to each part's tokens. Plus, during training, they shuffled the order of these parts. This makes the model permutation invariant, meaning it learns to understand each part for what it is, regardless of whether it processes the leg for the seat of a chair, for example.
Okay, let me see if I got this. So it's not generating one big messy point cloud or mesh anymore. It's generating like separate descriptions for each component right from the latent space. That's the core shift.
That's precisely the core shift in representation, yes. It's thinking in components from the very beginning.
And how does it actually build the final object from these separate descriptions then? How does it put the Lego bricks together correctly?
That leads perfectly into the second key innovation. The local global denoising transformer. This is all about managing information flow. So you need two things. You need fine-grained detail within each part, making sure a chair leg actually looks like a proper leg. And you need overall structure across all the parts, making sure the legs attach correctly to the seat and the seat to the back. So the transformer uses local attention. It focuses attention within each part's set of tokens, that Z, to capture the internal geometry and details of just that single part. But then it also uses global attention. Here, it looks across all the part tokens put together, the whole set Z. This allows it to model how the parts interact, how they relate to each other spatially, ensuring the whole object or scene makes sense structurally.
Wow, okay. That's clever. So it's like having like a detail-focused craftsman working on each piece, but also an architect overseeing the whole construction.
That's a fantastic analogy, exactly. It balances the fine details with the big picture.
And this dual focus, local and global, how does that help it figure out the parts it can't even see in the input image? That still seems like magic.
Right, that's where the image conditioning comes in. It uses deep features extracted from the input image, specifically using a powerful vision model called DOFU2. These features capture a high-level semantic understanding of the image content. And here's the crucial bit. These image features are injected into the ParkCrafter transformer using cross-attention, but they do it at both the local and the global attention levels.
Okay. Not just one or the other.
Exactly. This dual conditioning is really key. It helps align the generated parts with what's actually in the image, ensuring semantic consistency. But because it also conditions globally, and because the underlying model, TripOS G, has seen millions of 3D objects, it can infer the likely structure even for occluded or unseen parts based on the visible context and its prior knowledge.
It's like it sees a chair with 3 legs visible and thinks, okay, chairs usually have 4 legs positioned like this, so I'll add the 4th one here.
Pretty much, yeah. It combines the visual evidence with its learned structural priors. Now, of course, a model like this needs the right kind of data to learn from, and that leads to their dataset curation. They realized that many existing 3D datasets like Objaverse, ShapeNet, ABO actually contain part-level information, often from how the artists originally created the models.
But previous work just flattened it.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
They just treated the whole thing as one mesh. PartCrafter's team went back and specifically mined these existing part annotations. They curated a data set of about 50,000 objects that were already labeled with parts, totaling around 300,000 individual part meshes. They also mixed in some regular non-part labeled objects during training, sort of as a regularizer, to make sure it still handled whole objects well. And for generating scenes composed of multiple objects, they used the 3D front dataset.
So they were quite resourceful in building the data set they needed. Okay, architecture sounds solid, data seems smart, but the proof is in the pudding, right? How well does ParkCrafter actually perform compared to the older methods? Are we talking small gains or a big jump?
Well, it's a pretty significant jump based on their experiments. For generating objects with distinct parts, 3D part-level object generation, they compared it against baselines like Holopart. PartCrafter was significantly better in terms of fidelity. The generated shapes were much closer to the ground truth, measured by things like chamfer distance and F-score. But maybe even more striking was the efficiency. Generating a typical 4-part object took PartCrafter about 34 seconds. Holopart took, wait for it, 18 minutes.
Whoa, 34 seconds versus 18 minutes, that's huge.
It's enormous, yeah. A complete game changer for practical workflows. And here's something really interesting. PartCrafter actually outperformed its own backbone model, TripOS G, on standard object level quality metrics.
Wait, so adding the part structure made the overall object generation better?
Exactly. It suggests that forcing the model to understand the compositional structure actually helps it generate higher quality, more coherent shapes overall. It's not just about getting the parts right, it improves the whole thing. And of course, the results clearly showed its ability to infer those hidden or invisible structures we talked about. Then they looked at 3D object composed scene generation. Here they compared against MIDI, which remember needs ground truth segmentation masks as input. Even without those masks, PartCrafter produced scenes with better reconstruction fidelity than MIDI. And crucially, when they tested scenes with severe occlusion, lots of objects hiding behind others, PartCrafter's quality held up remarkably well, while MIDI's performance really dropped off.
That basically proves their point, doesn't it? That you don't necessarily need that explicit, potentially fragile segmentation step first.
Precisely. It shows that structured scene generation is possible end-to-end, directly from the image, even with challenging occlusions.
Okay, the performance sounds genuinely impressive. That speed up alone is incredible, and the ability to see the unseen parts. It really does feel like a superpower for 3D modeling. But when something works this well, you always wonder, did they cut any corners? Is there a trade-off somewhere? Maybe it uses way more memory or something?
That's always a good question to ask, and that's why ablation studies are so important. The researchers did a thorough job here, basically taking their model apart piece by piece to see which components were truly essential. For instance, they tested the necessity of local global attention. What happens if you remove local attention?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, uh-oh is right. The model completely collapses. It fails to generate anything meaningful. It seems that understanding the internal structure of each part is absolutely critical.
Okay, so local is essential. What about global?
If you remove the global attention, the model does generate meshes, but they lack proper part decomposition. Parts overlap significantly. They don't fit together coherently. So global attention is clearly crucial for that overall structural integrity. They did similar tests for the necessity of part identity control. Removing those learnable part identity embeddings also caused the model to collapse. It just couldn't differentiate between the parts without them.
So it needs to know this is leg 1, this is leg 2.
Exactly. That explicit identity is vital. They also confirmed that injecting the image features at both local and global levels gave the best results, the best balance between part fidelity and ensuring the parts made sense in the context of the input image. They even experimented with the order of applying local and global attention within the transformer blocks. They found this alternating pattern global in even layers. Local and odd layers gave the best trade-off, suggesting it helps information flow effectively between the part details and the overall structure. And one more cool finding. They showed ParkCrafter could generate reasonable results even if you asked for a different number of parts than it was strictly trained for, using the same input image.
Oh, interesting. So it's flexible.
Yeah, it shows it's capturing features hierarchically and isn't rigidly tied to one specific decomposition, which is great for downstream uses where you might want different levels of detail.
So pulling back to the bigger picture then, we've got this powerful, fast, structure-aware 3D generator. What are the immediate, real-world applications you see for this? Where could ParkCrafter make a difference soon?
Oh, the potential is huge for downstream tasks that rely on that part structure. A really obvious one is texture generation. Because ParkCrafter outputs meshes where you know which vertices belong to which semantic part, you can easily use existing texture generation models, like, say, HungYuan 3D2, and apply different textures to different parts accurately.
Without that horrible color bleeding you sometimes see.
Exactly. You avoid that issue where the texture from, say, a car's tire bleeds onto the wheel rim because the model doesn't understand they're separate things. ParkCrafter's output makes clean per-part texturing much easier. That's a big win for creating realistic assets. And beyond texturing, think about animation. You can easily rig and animate individual parts. Physical simulation assigning different physical properties to different components. Scene editing, moving, replacing, or deleting specific objects or parts within a scene becomes trivial. This also has big implications for things like real-to-simulation transfer and robotics training. Creating accurate, editable, part-aware digital twins of real-world objects and environments is crucial for training robots in simulation before deploying them. ParkCrafter could significantly accelerate that.
Are there any limitations they point out? Areas for future work?
The main one they mention is the dataset size. While 50,000 part-labeled objects is a good start, it's still relatively small compared to the millions of objects used to train some of the big whole object generation models. So scaling up the dataset with more diverse, high-quality part annotations is definitely a key area for making ParkCrafter even more powerful in general.
Right, makes sense. More data usually helps. So wrapping up this deep dive, it really feels like ParkCrafter marks a significant shift, moving away from just generating monolithic blobs to creating these semantically rich, editable 3D models part by part, directly from a single image. It's foundational stuff.
It really is. Yeah. And I think it underscores a broader point in AI development. When you explicitly build structural understanding into your models, getting them to think compositionally, more like humans do, you often end up with outputs that are not just more structured, but also more robust, more versatile, and often higher quality overall. So maybe a final thought for you listening. If you didn't have to deal with that complex, often unreliable two-stage process of segmenting first and then reconstructing, what new possibilities would that open up for your own work with 3D data?
That's a great question to ponder. We definitely encourage you to check out the ParkCrafter paper, look at their project website. The visual results are really quite stunning. The future of 3D creation certainly feels a lot more dynamic now. Thank you for joining us on this AI Paper podcast. We hope unpacking ParkCrafter gave you some valuable takeaways and maybe sparked some new ideas.